Yeah, good time. Let's see who's here. Ryan, thank you.
Hey, y'all.
Sarah, how have you been? Mr. Looper's here. Good, good, good. I know we got everyone here. All right. Well, now that we got our feelers consultant Bill Ray online, let's go ahead and get started. We see we have Jonathan here, Tom, Jai's here, Dan Foote from the city. Kirsten's here from Kaplan Kirsch. Polly, thank you also for being here. Sarah Jones of Ski Corps, Randy with City of Craig, Ryan with Hayden, myself with Steamboat, and Mr. Ray. We may get the Oak Creek and Yampa on, or no, Sierra's from there. Sierra, thank you for being here. And so we are good to go. So what we wanted to start off with is just kind of go through and get some feedback from the initial hearings that we started off with last week and the week before that, and what dialogue transpired offline, and how do you think we should talk about the next public hearings and what questions came up. So this is kind of just a debrief of the hearings that we had a little bit ago. Bill, do you want to add any?
Right, I agree. I don't think there's action items today unless Polly and Kirsten believe there's anything that came out on the IGA, but I don't think so. I don't think there's changes to the IGA. I think it's more a debrief, and then what we need for the second hearing for your community. Is it a whole nother review of the PowerPoint? I hope not, but maybe. Or is it more, here's what we heard and here's what we want to share back with you all. But what I think would be great is as we go through these entities, if, you know, the folks who were there at the meeting on the councils jump in and give us your feedback. I'll share some of my thoughts. Polly and Kirsten might share some of theirs. Michael, you were at every one of these. Randy, you were at most of them. So it's really just, yeah, I'll get out of the way here. We really just want to hear from you all and what you thought and what we need to think about moving forward.
Yes, and I'll just add that if our conclusion from our discussion or the instruction that the formation committee members are bringing back is we need something changed, that also we can make some tweaks, and in the past, in this circumstance, have made tweaks to language of the IGA in response to the feedback the formation committee heard at those public hearings. So if you think that, I'm not sure I heard any specific things, but again, part of this is to bring back the instruction and the feedback from, your public bodies. So let us know if you think you want to see some words changed or some additional detail in some feature, what you think you need.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm not
Thank you,
seeing
Polly.
Sonia here or anybody from Route. So do you want me to, did she?
So unfortunately, I do believe that at some point Sonia said she might have had a conflict with this meeting. She was hoping to not have that conflict, but looks like she's maybe not able to join. I can ping her as well to see if she can jump on.
Yeah, or either one. One of us should kind of text her along the way. But I'll get started from City of Steamboat Springs to kind of give you an update. Randy Looper, who was in attendance at the meeting, we had that at the kickoff of all these hearings, and I would say it went really well. We just kind of went through the whole process. I think it was important to go through the time frame and letting people see that timeline slide. We did linger there a little bit, just to kind of see where we are in the process. But more importantly, it was realizing what kind of runway we have moving forward with the after the public hearings, what's the next step? And so I think for us, we just want to get some ideas on polling. And what we should talk a little bit about that, Bill, is how many polls are and talk a little bit about that on this meeting, because we have the different jurisdictions and how much it's going to cost per poll, and is it something we do separate or conglomerate? So those are a couple of questions that I had off the front end. What I'm more, and I was at all those meetings, so I'm kind of curious, Ryan, how did it go in your meeting after us?
Thanks, Michael. It was really good. We actually approved the IGA.
I know.
Whoops.
That's okay.
No, it's all good. Overall, went really well. One thing that keeps coming up that I think I would love the opinion of the group is just how we are messaging Mountain Rail. With our constituency in Hayden, it's almost like RTA Mountain Rail. They're like, people have a hard time even just separating them in their mind. And I do wonder if it's be advantageous for us as we go along to really be a little more aggressive in just our language of how we plan to engage with Mountain Rail. Right now, we're pretty vague, but that was kind of the big takeaway, Michael, was the relationship with Mountain Rail. And yeah, no feedback really on the IGA at all, other than what you all heard. Bill and Michael, thanks for being there. Just around routes, the routes of buses and stuff. Even discussion about routes and buses outside of the town of Hayden, which was an interesting development, frankly. So
that's what struck me about your council was their concern about northern Routt County.
Yeah, Bill, that actually struck me too. And I didn't really get any good feedback on why. I think a lot of our council, we work outside of Hayden, so we interact with Steamboat and Craig and North Routt quite a bit, and especially in the construction trades and stuff. So maybe that was why. But yeah, it was interesting. I don't really have any feedback to provide you on why.
Well, I think that does bring up a conversation with the county, right? Right now, we're going along US 40 and we bypass 129 altogether. And they do make a good point of, so one of his council was talking about, what about North Routt? And that's one area that we really haven't talked about. It was on Fair and Piers. I don't even think it was in detail on Fair and Piers going up to that part of Routt County, because it is remote. Most people do have cars. To me, to answer that question, Ryan, I would sit there and just say, this is one of those things that once we get the formation going, it's kind of like a gypsum. We'll see how the needs are. And when the success of the RTA is growing and areas need to grow into that, then Routt County will speak on behalf of unincorporated Routt County and say they need to get into a circulator or something going up there. But until then, it's not even on the radar.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Michael. Absolutely.
I just wanted to let everyone know I see that Sonia has joined.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry
great.
for the delay,
worries.
everybody. We're having our own little transportation emergency over here that I'm getting a lot of interest about tomorrow's stack meeting. So my phone's been blowing up all day, and you guys know this project, the Safe Crossings project. Anyway, it's a long story, but battling with the transportation people to get us some money.
No worries. Randy, go ahead and get started. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that the good thing that I liked about how we did ours was having the workshop first and got thoughts, ideas out of council members that I haven't heard a word out of. They didn't speak much, but they all seem to be in favor of it, which is good. The other thing that came out of that, which I hadn't really thought about, but makes sense, is if we want to separate and do an RTA vote and not do a sales tax vote the same time, that's a possibility. Just because, I mean, we have the highest sales tax pretty much in the Western Slope right now. And I think we can do it, but it's going to be a hard sale, and everyone believes it's going to be a hard sale to raise sales tax. But we don't have any other option. There's no way you're going to get the money, and that's what I just got done doing focus groups with about through the chamber with about 8 different type groups, which was good because everyone was in favor of it, but all of them were saying sales tax isn't going to fly. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But it was it. But I think it was positive. I think the council's in favor. I think we can move forward from there. It's just gonna be a lot of pushing and seeing and going to every single any employer, every single group, every single everything, pushing why the sales tax isn't going in to do a general thing into the city. It's going strictly for this. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was impressed a little bit that your council really was supportive of the RTA formation and having that on the ballot. And most of them felt that they could get that passed, the actual formation of the RTA. When I leaned over and asked them about the sales tax, it was more of that question. And
Right.
again, we're throwing down sales tax, but during this polling, I think it's going to be a very important poll to see what other options that people have. I mean, if they lean toward a property tax, which, no one wants to get taxed right now.
Yep.
I was looking at the newspaper in the Bugle, and on the Bugle, the front page had 3 different taxes being talked about. There's the lift tax and the vacancy tax and the RTA tax. And so, we're coming at the community in a lot of different ways. And we know that it's going to hit some chords that could derail a lot of things. So we want to look at, Bill, what we can do down the road if it's wise to get the RTA formation. What are the advantages and disadvantages of getting the RTA started now and then moving forward? I don't want to hijack this meeting on that, but I think we're going to have that conversation in the summer, that when we split these two up come August and say, let's have 2 different, it may be very clear that we just have 2 different votes and we kind of move forward, and each community may be a little different. But yeah, Craig definitely had an aspect of definitely want to do it, don't know how to pay for it.
So Michael, I'm glad you brought up the magic number. 3 is the magic number, man. That's how many tax initiatives on the ballot it takes to get people to say no. I just wanted to mention a couple things about what you guys have said, because I think it is very relevant to think about splitting the issues and considering a formation prior to considering a funding mechanism. I'm not happy about it. As you know, I'm not happy about where we're at as far as time, but I don't think this is the right time to go to the ballot with the funding and the formation. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm not like on a hard no position to this, but I think from a strategy standpoint, I just don't think this ballot is going to be a good one. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty, which may or may not settle out by the time that we go to the ballot. And I think to some degree, some of these meetings have created maybe a little more confusion for the public than clarity, which is not great. So I'm gonna just
Sonia, where are you at then with that? If you're saying that, what I mean, you said you don't know for sure. Where are you at as far as, do you think it should all be in 2026? Be specific.
I am pretty firmly of the mind that splitting the 2 issues is hugely important. And I'm not certain about, honestly, I don't want to waste the time, to get to, 2026 is too far away. But what are the options, right? And will the formation even pass on what I think is going to be an unpopular ballot? It's hard to say. So, if I had to make a decision right now, I would say, yeah, go for the formation in this current ballot cycle and continue to noodle on the funding source. One of the things we've got is some other opportunities through some of the legislation we've passed. There are other things. It doesn't have to be the sales tax necessarily that get some of these projects done.
So you're making some assumptions based upon your conversations and things of past ballots and getting things on there. What would be what would trigger you to say yes, 2025 would be a good time for a funding ballot language?
I understand that there's going to be some polling. So I think that that's going to be a really important issue. I mean, I think we all live in our own universes, right? And we talk to the people we talk to, and we read the news we read. But you know, the statistical information is really much more informative. So I think that's one key piece. I think if the uncertainty of this world, you know, that we're living in right now, and I mean, the state budget, the federal budget, you know, county people like myself are trying to figure out how we're going to pick up the pieces. So, you know, is there going to be some miraculous sea change where money just starts falling back from the sky for the programs that we're already having to cut, including vaccination programs? You know, now we got measles in Colorado, and we just got all of our vaccine money cut from the federal administration. So like, I mean, if it gets better and not worse at the federal and state level so that local governments aren't crushed, I think that would be a big change. I think if you guys figure out your vacancy and lift ticket tax stuff, I mean, I think that's been disruptive. I think Ski Corps' contribution, one of the takeaways from the Routt County meeting was that, and I told you guys this at the last meeting, I told my commissioners we were not going to have a solid understanding of what that was going to look like. But yet they continue to ask. And, you know, that has been a thing that has created some skepticism. So I think, you know, having that firmed out and solid in a sooner than later kind of time frame is going to be really important. So, I mean, I'm not really answering your question. I'm just telling you all of the variables that have to fall into the right order for me to be able to say, yeah, this is it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Michael, can I jump in? I mean,
Please.
let's it was not on the agenda. It should have been an update on polling and the methodology that I'm envisioning for the polling, because I think that can help inform the rest of our conversation this afternoon. Because it did come up at, you know, Hayden, for example, asked, well, how are we going to do a survey of our community? So, you know, how are we going to get information about what our specific communities want? So what I envision, and I have an 8 a.m. meeting tomorrow morning with the firm that I've worked with on polling in Eagle Valley and RAFTA, is that we would do a statistically based survey across the entire proposed member jurisdiction area. And that survey would be would be statistically weighted toward a 2025 turnout, because that's the ballot we are pointing to. So just to let you all know, that's, as you all know, as elected officials and others who work in local government, that's going to be a lower turnout election. Those typically trend older with voters and sometimes more Republican, and can be a little more tax sensitive. I mean, there is, you know, there is kind of a likely voter model that makes 25 a little more challenging. So we model our survey toward that those demographics, because that gives you all a reasonable look at what, you know, what this electorate might think of this question. So that would be a statistically based survey across the whole, you know, 300 to 400 samples. And we would be asking kind of bigger framing questions. It would be very hard in this survey to have Hayden only questions or Oak Creek only questions. And the reason being is those cohorts as a part of the whole sample would be so small that it would be cost prohibitive, first of all, and statistically irrelevant, because the sample sizes would be too small. But that doesn't mean I don't have a plan to have each community have a way to have a survey that would go to their local concerns and issues. What I would do is take the same questions that we have on the statistical survey. We can do an online survey within each of your communities that then I could work with you on community by community to ask questions that might be relevant, add some specific questions that would be relevant to your specific community. So some Hayden only questions, some Craig only questions. We can get that survey out using text messaging and other ways to get those surveys pushed out. And those will allow us to expand the data set for our analysis and then bring in some more community by community data points into our survey. So that's the methodology that I want to deploy. Happy to take questions, discuss that, but it's a good methodology because we're balancing the statistical survey with the more community focused surveys. And just so you all know, especially if Jai or anyone else is listening, it's not going to impact the budget. It's all within what's already been planned for our survey project here.
Thanks for always tapping into that, Bill. Appreciate it.
Hey,
Bill,
I
have a
gotta keep
question
an
then.
eye on the budget.
Yep. So what you're basically saying is there'll be a large survey that will cover everyone with specific questions within that, and then there'll be more specific surveys later, or because my issue is that, and this is the example I have, and it's recent. Yampa Valley Housing Authority did a survey that included questions that related to Craig, but was 90% Steamboat related. And the feedback I got is, why did I fill that out? Doesn't have anything to do with Craig. It's mostly Steamboat questions. I'm not going to do it. I got that from a lot of people.
Right.
Basically, any organizations, any people I sent it to, that's the response I got back.
So I would envision that the Craig version of the survey that we would push out in Craig via text messaging, working with the city to, invite people to take it through city communications. Maybe the chamber would send it out as well. Would definitely be tailored much more to the Craig resident and would hopefully give us a better pulse, a pulse of Craig.
Okay.
Yeah. And timing on that. No, I'd like that to happen in, May as well. So that we're going into the summer armed with a bundle of data, both, quantitative, the kind we get from surveys, and qualitative, the kind we get from feedback, the kind we get from the open-ended questions in the survey where people can speak their minds. Comments like, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
And everything in between.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Well, let's keep going on some other questions of the layout. Did you have any more comments, Ryan or Sierra from South Route?
I just had a question. It's actually for Randy. Randy, at your presentations, was there any discussion on Mountain Rail? Any feedback on that, or was there?
Yeah, there was questions on it, but we're, at least right now, because I'm the main one pushing and presenting Mountain Rail, and I'm the main one pushing and presenting RTA, I've separated them. And the way it was presented and the way I presented it is that, yeah, RTA is going to be part of Mountain Rail, but it's right now, the Mountain Rail station will end basically downtown. Craig, we have no way of getting people anywhere. RTA's point and purpose is to get the circulator, to get people around Craig. And then once Mountain Rail comes in 2030, whenever it happens, we have a bus system that can take those people wherever they want to go around Craig. That's the way I presented it and tried to tie it in.
Smart.
So Sonia,
Great.
just before you got online, one of the questions that Ryan had talked about was that at his council meeting, it was also brought up about Mountain Rail. And we wanted to kind of know, delineating the two.
And was it brought up in a negative way?
No, in a positive way that I think is something we should consider. And I've said this earlier, but something we should consider of how we're messaging with Mountain Rail in this RTA is that, especially Sonia, in light of the hesitancy about going to ballot here in 25 and the funding mechanisms and all that. I think we potentially have a moment in time here with Mountain Rail that could really persuade a lot of people. And on a positive note around ballot measures and stuff, and again, this is in Hayden, but we did pass an increase of sales tax to fund our Hayden Community Center and the purchase of the Hayden Center during COVID, during the same like kind of crazy what's the future going to be and all that kind of stuff, and that gives me hope for really good ideas going to the ballot. Like
Yeah, that's helpful. And one of the questions in the Housing Authority survey that Randy just referenced, is specifically about rail. And I guess that's the one that triggered the folks. But I just was making the Mountain Rail Coalition meeting agenda for next week, and I pulled from the last agenda, and we had on our agenda specifically Mountain Rail and RTA, like what's the relationship and how do we talk about it? And I think Randy has a really good way of messaging it. And I think my way has been more that we are continuing to advocate for Mountain Rail and including the possibility for funding and, to match state funds in the future. But I think the key negative message on the rail thing is that, people who are skeptical of rail are going to think that the RTA's money is only going to go to that. And I just heard this on the call I was just on, who's some folks who are going to help us advocate for our Safe Crossings project, wanted to go ahead and throw Mountain Rail under the bus to the state by saying, why are you giving all the attention to this big, fancy glitzy thing when our children are about to get run over at the Sleeping Giant school? So it's kind of an interesting mix, and hopefully we can get some of that in the survey results to see, where is the actual entirety of our community.
Yeah,
I think this is, go ahead, Bill.
well, I just do think that the broader statistical survey could help inform that how popular or not this Mountain Rail conversation is. So let's work hard on how we frame that in the poll to get back something that helps guide us to frame it, not just messaging wise, but how we frame it in the IGA so that the RTA is positioned in the right place, or what we think will be the right place.
Yeah.
Bill, I think that's right, but what is the timing of the survey?
My goal is end of April, first week of May.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the hurdles that we all recognize now. It's April. We have the whole spring and summer to kind of get through the messaging, right? And that being, I know Randy and I are both on that, and Sonia, the formation committee, I think Ryan, with the Mountain Rail as well as the RTA. And we are hearing this confusion between one or the other, what's paying for one or the other. And in the process, I'm learning more about, what the state's not funding when I found out that they're not going to pay for the commuter rail. And then it's like, okay, then we don't want to put the kibosh on the Mountain Rail, but we do know that we have to be honest with our constituents and say the commuter portion of that is going to fall on the communities. And the confusion comes into Yampa Valley.
That's actually not true, Michael. I mean,
what do you mean?
That is untrue. The state is committed to the capital improvements and to the rolling stock. And once the local
I'm talking
government
operations of the commuter rail. It was expressed to me by Paul DeRocha that the operations of this on the ongoing process was going to rely heavily on us.
We will need to make some form of contribution, whether that's fees or some other way that we generate revenues. But the state will for sure be the operator. The state will do the capital investments and the rolling stock investments, which are actually the big costs. And I think we need to be really careful about, how we're saying this to our community, because when people hear they're going to have to pay for rail in its entirety, which is what I just heard from what you just said, they freak out.
Yeah, no, I thank you for making that clarity, big time, because your finger's on the pulse of the Mountain Rail Coalition. So I need you to kind of speak up when it comes to that miscommunication on my part. But from what Paul said and what I was anticipating, and the confusion is, what part of the Mountain Rail will the RTA help out with. And then what else of the mountain rail is going to be done by the state. And if you would say something, or if you can find out something in our conversations, Sonia, that, 15% is going to be on this RTA and the rest is going to be taken care of one way or the other, or is it 50-50? That kind of dialogue is going to help us with this messaging about mountain rail and RTA.
Totally agree.
Yep. No, it's a really valuable conversation because it's good. It's helping me think of ways to frame it in the survey.
Yeah.
I
We just don't want the mountain rail confusion to just explode everything. We just need to make sure that we communicate it well. And listen, other communities don't have this challenge. Winter Park and Arvada and stuff. I mean, we're trying to do this RTA in conjunction with the mountain rail, and it just because it's both transportation, everyone's kind of putting them together. So we have to realize if that's the assumption, then we need to put the messaging out that talks about those percentages, so that we're saying, yeah, we're going to be as it says in one of our service goals for the RTA, number 8 was we're going to be a stakeholder in that, and that stakeholder may just be a small percentage, when it comes down to it. We will know more next month, I think, Sonia, when the service development plan really comes out. And really, it's after that service development plan when we really need to, as this group here discusses the messaging for the difference between the two and what part we're going to be involved with.
Hey, this is Brian from
Exactly
Steamboat.
right.
I'm confused now. My understanding was that service goal gave us the option to participate and to fund, but that the mountain rail and RTA are completely separate. And that was what the understanding with council at Steamboat's council meeting was. And now it sounds like we're talking about the fact that rail is part of the RTA. Am I misunderstanding that?
So I guess the best way to answer that question, Brian, would just be to say, we do not want to preclude mountain rail from being something that could be funded by the RTA. So we want to have specific and concrete projects, and we want to have visionary projects that are not disallowed by the IGA language or the ballot language. So I'm calling those types of projects the placeholder projects. I do think Michael's right that it would be good to have some more specificity about what is the price tag. But mountain rail is a part of this. And I think that's part of why I say that some of these public meetings were more counterproductive than productive, because when I hear a city council member say that the RTA is only buses, that concerns me because it's not.
Sure.
So,
And I agree. That's my worry is if rail is part of RTA, then we need to go back to council, Michael, you and I, and clarify that with council that that's not correct. RTA is not just buses. It does include rail. What that looks like, we don't know yet.
So let me interject here. What our IGA says right now is that we may contribute funding to mountain rail. So there is no project that involves an operational role, and there's only a permissive opportunity to fund. Is that what we want it to be? And is that what it can be?
That is the confusion.
Right.
Because that's exactly what you said was my understanding and was the rest of Steamboat Council's understanding. But now I'm hearing talks of, well, what percentage of the RTA is it going to be? That doesn't sound optional. That sounds like, no, rail is part of RTA.
well, wait a minute. I think, Brian, I think the question that Michael was posing is what percentage of the rail needs to be funded locally,
Yes.
regardless of the funding source?
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So that was my misunderstanding.
I think we all have a lot of things to work out still. I mean, because
Okay.
that was one of the 9 bullet points or whatever that were presented as an objective of the RTA and in the IGA. So I'm a little confused as to why any council member would have thought it wasn't in there. I mean, it was explicit and in writing. So we do need to clarify these things.
now,
Although again, to be clear, it's not a mandatory commitment, it's a permissive.
Right. And
opportunity.
that's the reason why we added it, because
Yeah.
originally we were talking about not including it, but it gives us the ability to do what we need to do or want to do at some point in time. It's not saying, no, it's not going to happen, but it's not saying specifically we're going to give 20% to it. That was the whole
Right.
reason why we did the language like that.
So sounds like we definitely have to sharpen up our messaging around the RTA's role with Mountain Rail. The more I think about it, the word stakeholder, right? That's a term of art for people like us, right? Who do public policy. Most people don't probably know. Maybe it's a word, we have to have some different messaging. Maybe it's a partner, or I don't know. Partner sounds pretty strong though, but we might have to find a different way to frame it so it reduces the confusion.
I feel like this
Right.
might actually add to the confusion. But this is a question for the group that I have is when I think of mountain rail, that phrase, I think of the Mountain Rail Coalition, Denver to Craig, like the big statewide rail initiative, right? What we really are talking about is commuter rail, which they're almost separate to me because, like, as we know, there is no commuter rail that functions in the state of Colorado that's not under an RTA. So I wonder if just separating mountain rail and commuter rail is a good way to like start messaging this. But I also could be wrong on how I am interpreting those two phrases. So if I am, please correct me.
No, I could be wrong too, but that's the way I interpret it. I interpret it as mountain rail is the once or twice or however many times it ends up being from Denver to Craig. And the commuter that's just dealing with the RTA is the steamboat to Craig that could be 3 to 4, whatever times separate and different than mountain rail.
And that's what's on the community of the Yampa Valley, not the RTA. That's
You're
on the
correct.
entire community. Is if there is going to be a commuter portion,
I think
that's
that
on us.
I think that that's 100% correct. That they are two different things. And Ryan, just kind of for a little bit of background too. I mean, when we first started this, it was like the state was all in on the ski train element of mountain rail. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, when we ran into the positive train control problem in Bond, from Bond to Steamboat, it was like, well, now we're all in on commuter rail. But we can't really, and so it has been, I mean, I think you're right that we need to be using the term commuter rail more often. I mean, I think they are two separate projects, and the way that we are having the state fund the commuter rail portion is because they also want the mountain rail portion, and there are elements of the governor's missive that are connecting transportation hubs, and so airports to airports and things like that. But I think you're right, from just a pure, like, what do people understand perspective, we probably just need to immediately change our vernacular. I would not cut mountain rail necessarily out of the IGA, but maybe it's mountain rail and commuter rail.
Yep. Could it be something like a stakeholder, or whatever correct word, a stakeholder in the mountain rail process and a potential future operator of regional commuter rail?
We're not going to be able to be the operator. Like, the state has already been clear that they will do the operation of anything because of their, relationship with Union Pacific and all of that.
Yeah.
But I think and I don't know that we have to solve this today, but I think these are really excellent points about, like, maybe somebody will have a brilliant moment of, what does that look like for editing the IGA? But I think the point of talking more about commuters specifically really is a good one.
And maybe our language needs to reflect what's in the service development plan, which is intercity and commuter. Like, it is all mountain rail, and it's intercity and commuter. Those are the two different identified services under mountain rail.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point also, but I think that people do understand commuter better than the other, but we'll figure it out.
So I wanted to just see if this might be a good suggestion. Here's exactly what we say about mountain rail. We say the authority shall coordinate with CDOT and federal governing agencies to enhance regional transit, including but not limited to improvements to connections to the authority area via bus stang and other wide state bus programs and mountain rail and may provide financial support for such purposes? Should we say, and other commuter rail programs and provide financial services for such purposes? Or provide
I mean,
financial support?
The IGA and the messaging language can be a little different, I think.
Yes, they
I
can.
mean, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it
Mhm.
needs to be explicit in the IGA, but I think it's more, let's start talking more about commuters.
Okay.
Is that kind of what you're thinking, Ryan, or do you think we need it in the IGA?
No, Sonia, I'm spot on. I don't think that's needed. I think it's just how we message it and how we talk about it is most important.
So, Sonia, would it be safe to say that from what you understand about the Mountain Rail, the state is fully committed to providing, 3 big trains from Craig to Denver, and they're going to pay for the infrastructure and 3 big trains. That was the understanding I got from Paul. Outside of that would be this commuter line, which would have to be taken in part of some of the operations, or not the operations, but the funding from the local community, because Paul said that any commuter rail is not being funded by by the whole state. It's usually by the area that it's servicing. And so with that, I think it'd be worth having that delineation. When we talk about Mountain Rail as a group here, we talk about the big train, okay? But what the RTA is working with is the commuter rail or the little train.
That's right, Michael. And honestly, I mean, all of this will become more public after the ink is dry on the contracts with UP and the state as to what the exact deal is. But it's not a number of trains. It's a number of miles.
Yeah. Service miles, access.
Right.
Okay. Well, listen, we got 15 minutes left, and I want to respect everyone's time in this, because really the meeting wasn't to be hijacked about Mountain Rail, but this is part of the messaging that we want to figure out. We have a meeting in a couple of weeks back with our second hearing with everybody. Is there anything that you would like us to cover, or like Bill and Polly to know about moving into the remaining hearing dates?
From my perspective, it's really just whether any jurisdiction feels like it needs to see some revisions to IGA text as responsive to the first round of public hearings.
Okay.
And I'm kind of hearing no.
Well, I mean,
I'm
I'm a little concerned about my commissioner's focus on the ski corps commitment.
Yeah.
I'm a little, I mean, I asked them, what do you need to move forward? They wanted that information. I told them it wasn't going to be available at that time. But I mean, can we get a little more clarity around, and maybe this probably is a legal question, how would any commitments that are made by the ski corps be actually right protected, whether it's through the IGA or some other form of legal mechanism? Because I think that would give, my commissioners a lot more confidence that, this is a real commitment that's being made, and that there are some, I don't want to say consequences, but that it's been thought through as to what happens if this or that, or how does this work. And one of the things we talked about was, Michael, you suggested, would the city kind of be like the vouching for ski corps, since you guys are talking for the lift ticket tax? And so then that agreement is that the city would provide that funding and not ski corps necessarily, because the city is party to the IGA. So, I mean, again, this is a little bit beyond. And looks like Dan's popped up, so that might be a legal question that he has some way to answer.
Mr. Foote?
Well, Dan is kind of getting organized from the bigger picture perspective. If we wanted to, we could do a contractual obligation or pledge. Sorry, Sarah, you could do that. And it could be made an exhibit or an element of the agreement that they sign on to specifically. It could be a pass-through from a lift tax. it could be, as I mentioned, either a separate contract or it could be a specific provision that the Steamboat signs on to, not as a member of the RTA, but as a pledge or conditioned part or bound party to the IGA contract.
Yeah, so Sonia, I would agree with what Polly just had to say, in the sense that there's a number of different ways this could happen. And we're, still pretty early in the process, and I don't know where we're going to end up. But however it goes, I do think there is a way to structure it where it is, a binding obligation and, not just the promise that isn't enforceable. But until we know whether it's going to be a tax or a contractual obligation or something like that, it's hard to say, or hard to try to anticipate how we would structure it. But I'm sure there is a way to make it, binding and enforceable, and something that all of these communities can be comfortable with, if they will be a partner in the upcoming years.
Dan, can you talk a little bit about just process? I mean, are you seeing that becoming clear?
Yeah, the process I think is clear. We are, I am working with my council on potential ballot language. And at the same time, Councilor Swintek, who's on the call right now, and Councilor West are engaged in a facilitated negotiation process with SSRC representatives. And they've got a meeting on the 10th, and I think they have 3 or 4 other meetings scheduled in the next couple of months. So, hopefully by early summer, we'll have a better idea of which direction this is going. And, I don't know if Brian or Sarah have anything else to add to this, but that's the process we're looking at.
Yes, and I think depending on what the results of that will determine which way we go in terms of what a contractual agreement would look like.
Well, I feel as though it's my obligation as the representative from Routt County just to make sure that you guys are aware that that was a big flag. And if there's any possible way to provide anything either in writing or verbally at the next meeting, I think it will go a lot smoother. So I know that you guys have to take your time with the negotiations. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or pushy, but the other two are counting on me to make sure that it's reflected, that it's really important to them to have some assurances in place.
Yeah, so I have been thinking about that. I am aware that there was a lot of feedback on this point, and sort of given how early we are in the process, I think it would be difficult to thread the needle and put some language in the IGA, that my council will be asked to approve in 13 days. So, I don't have a good answer to that question.
Okay. Brian, did you have anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add. We have not gotten consensus among council about our goal with the negotiations. Ski Corps has been clear. They view us and the rest of Routt County as a key partner. And I understand rail is really important to them. So I would trust and assume that their commitment to this is solid, regardless of the results of our negotiation with the city on other topics.
Thank you, Brian. All right, it's 2:51. I just wanted to kind of notice Jason with Fair and Pierce is online. Is any of the communities that we were here talking about coming up needing any additional services or dialogue from them for the hearing coming up?
Well, I'll jump in while Jason probably unmutes, but yeah, we heard loud and clear from Yampa that they felt that there was not enough specifics in the presentation to kind of help them understand why they would be part of this. So I have reached out to Jason and Michael, and they've provided me better talking points on potential South Route service that I will use with Yampa at the next meeting and share with Oak Creek, because they've yet to have their first public hearing.
And Commissioner Salinas is also talking to Yampa. She had a one-on-one, I believe, with the mayor, and shared some of those points that Fair and Pierce shared with us. So I'll see if she can be there with you at that Yampa meeting.
Great.
Yeah, just to answer that question, Michael, we're just as needed, as these questions come up, filling in the details. I will note that it was an interesting conversation because it did somewhat revolve around the value of being in the RTA and then the value of service relative to contribution. And that's a tricky one just overall because, we're talking about building a transportation system and through the RTA, and it's not always balanced. There isn't a direct, okay, you generated this much sales tax, so you're going to get this much service. You could do it that way, but it doesn't result in a nice comprehensive system because there are so many indirect benefits associated with it. So just wanted to note that can be a tricky issue to navigate.
Not to mention for like Yampa and Oak Creek, how do we want a message to them that even though they're apprehensive about taxing and contributing, they would be by significant margins a net beneficiary of this comprehensive transit system that Jason just said.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. That's the way I'm trying to push it in Craig, is that, yeah, we are paying for Steamboat businesses, but we're also gaining a circulator route that we couldn't pay for without this. And that Steamboat is still paying a majority of the cost. Yeah, we're helping them, but they're paying for majority. So at least that's the way I'm pushing it.
Yep.
Yep. And just on that, on Yampa, I think, and thank you, Jason, for bringing up being available. One of the things that they talked about, which came up in some of the previous reports since 1986, was the van pool failures. Right. It's been tried. People have lived there for many, many years. They're like, we've done this before. It just doesn't work unless, and the one thing that when I finally spoke up, I kind of kept my mouth shut to hear the conversation. But when I did speak up, it was basically saying that I fully recognize it would be foolish for us to do a van pool. It needs to have a guaranteed circulator route on a 45-minute scale that they know that they can guarantee a bus is going to come by, whether there's nobody on the bus or it's full of people or whatever. It's just the consistency is what needs to happen. Once I said that, there was a lot of nods and a lot like Sierra saying, yeah, that's what we want to see. A guaranteed commuter that or RTA that's on a guaranteed fixed route schedule. And so that seemed to kind of switch a little bit of the tone. Would you not agree, Bill?
Yes, it did. And we're going to have more data or better talking points to illustrate that at the upcoming meetings.
And that's what Jason with Fair and Peers is going to help us kind of crystallize a little bit more. One of the things was they weren't part of the conversation when we had the report from last March that Fair and Peers put together. And I've been getting kickback ever since. And I apologize that they weren't part of it. They weren't the funding. It wasn't the focus of it. And so we came back and it's kind of spurred this whole RTA going on there. But what I'm hearing is that they want a little bit more information for their area. So Jason is going to provide a little bit more on that. And that's why I asked everybody on the call, is there anything more that you think that you might need from our other consultants on the call? I'm not hearing that, so that's good.
And you can contact me offline and separately if you think of something between now and then.
Yeah.
Right. This isn't your only opportunity.
No. Thanks, Sierra. Did you want to add anything or just, I appreciate your nod.
Yeah, no, I echo exactly what you said, Michael. So thank you. I think just a little bit more clarity and just reassurance, as you already articulated, there's like PTSD from our community that it's just going to fail. And it's just pivoting that positive at moment of like, this can work and this is how it can happen. So you're spot on, Michael. Thank you. And thank you, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not take up any more time unless there's something that's drastic. We just kind of wanted to get a debrief that everyone were on the same page, that we're kind of working together in our communities. Definitely have to find some solutions with the Mountain Rail commuter portion. That's what we're really talking about. And let's try to focus on the commuter part and see what that's going to be. And we won't know until the end of the month or May when we get the service development plan. And we may be pleasantly surprised on some of the calls that I have been on with the Mountain Rail Coalition, with the CDOT and the governor's office, you know, we don't know what they're going to pony up and how this is going to give the benefit for us, but they really want this to happen. And so we need to be positive and make sure that our constituents get the right messaging. And if we have to say a little bit more time, then we need to say we're coming out with this development plan. But moving forward, I feel really confident that we can message this to our community about the RTA. My goal that we need to have is that if the train never happens, ever, we get a Yampa Valley Regional Transportation Authority to really expand our communities and tie them closer together. All right.
I have a quick question. Bill, what did you say we're gonna go to poll? You're gonna do polling here at the end of this month, early May. Like, is that gonna happen before our next meeting?
Well, and next meeting is on the agenda. I think that polling would probably be live and happening during our next meeting, not before our next meeting. I was thinking we'd have a late April meeting after we wrap up all these special meetings. I mean, public hearings, sorry. However, that could be a fairly quick meeting, just as a check-in, touch base, because a couple things are going to start happening in mid-April after these second public hearings start happening. We're going to send this IGA to CDOT, and we're going to start the clock there, and hopefully Polly and her team pushes CDOT to give us feedback quickly. And so we're going to have to circle back on what we're hearing from CDOT and also Moffett County. Now, I'll jump in, and sorry, Ryan, that I'm taking over your question, but I'm going to knock off a couple agenda items. I did meet with the 3 Moffett County commissioners last week when I was up doing meetings. We had a great meeting. They were very interested and very supportive, as long as it doesn't include Moffett County. But they really liked the circulator in Craig. They really thought additional service on 40 is important, really, for safety. They really kind of went in on that. I have every sense from that meeting that they are not going to be an encumbrance to this process, nor our request for the flagpole down 40. For Polly, so you know, Polly, when we transmit the IGA to them, can you also draft up whatever instrument they need to resolve to approve to give us that flagpole? Because I think they're just going to do it for us.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, as long as you do, you do the drafting of it for them.
Yeah, and Bill, what meeting were they gonna do that? We can.
I don't know. I can find out from Jeff Comstock. I'll circle. We can do that offline. We don't have to hold everyone here. So Ryan, I think we do a short check-in end of April, updates on the polling process, updates on public hearing number 2, updates on transmitting to CDOT. Maybe it's 1 hour. You know, maybe there's any other topics we have to cross, but I think honestly, for a little bit, the cadence of formation meetings tackling items in the IGA might slow down in May and June, and then pick back up in July and August.
For our ballot language.
Yeah, to finalize the IGA and build a ballot question. I think at the next meeting in April, I am going to build a matrix for you all to review and discuss that's going to look at all the different ballot scenarios. One question in 25, 2 questions in 25, 1 in 25, 1 in 26, and the pluses and minuses of all those from a process and political standpoint. Because I think that's a topic we don't want to wait till July or August to discuss. I think we need to start talking that up more late April into May. And our polling's going to help inform that conversation as well.
Yes, please, and thank you.
You got it. I'm on it. Sorry, Ryan, for hijacking your question.
No, it was wonderful, Bill. Thank you.
All right.
All right, so sounds like Bill, you'll be sending out your usual polling.
Yep,
For our
yep,
next
I'm gonna
meeting date.
I'll do a doodle poll for our next meeting date. The other thing is, real quick, and then I'll be quiet and we can move on, is the technical committee. I am hearing though, or I think what I'm hearing and I picked up from meetings is we do need to start figuring out a little more specifics than what we talked about at our last meeting with Michael's presentation from Fair and Peers, of a low service level or a high service level. I think I heard that we want a little more, maybe, a little more specific. So I do think if you're on the technical committee or what, I think we do need to hear from your communities, like what level of service of these service goals you want to see, so we can kind of start to be more, a little more focused on, potential deliverables. So I'm going to start facilitating that process here as well in April. Just so there's a little more specifics. We heard that in Craig. I thought I heard that in Craig. I thought I heard that in other communities, Hayden as well. Like, well, what is it? So I think we need to start answering that question.
So I agree, Bill, but my question with that is, how do you answer that question without the survey information? Because that's what I was hoping to get out of the survey and the talking is, okay, yes, we want to, like in Craig and between Craig to Steamboat, yeah, we want more times to go between Craig and Steamboat in the early morning and the later afternoon. And yes, we want a circulator, but I don't have a clue, and I don't know how I find out a clue what you're willing to pay for versus what is worthwhile to you.
Right. It's sausage making at its highest level, Randy. So we're going to work a little bit on it there, take a little bit from the CERT, and then hopefully we come up with something in June and July that can help us really build the final package and push. But I don't want to wait till June and July to dig into that on a technical level as well.
Makes sense.
And I'll just note those ranges also are dependent on the revenue side, what level of taxation we're talking about. So,
yeah.
Well, and the other thing, technical wise, pulling the groceries and the other things out of sales tax makes a huge difference. Maybe not as large as Steamboat, but in Craig, it's a huge dollar amount difference when you pull groceries, because that's probably 70% of our sales tax.
Interesting.
Well, and I think our last numbers did reflect that.
Yes, our numbers, the numbers I've shared with you all reflect no groceries, no utilities, where no things not allowed by state collected sales tax. Let's put it like that. Diapers, groceries, prescriptions, stuff like that.
And if I'm not mistaken, even with that taken out, Randy, you were still the second largest funding mechanism into the RTA, right behind
Steamboat. Yeah, and I agree with that. The difference is Bill was throwing out numbers of $1 million, and when I talked to Mindy later, she was thinking it wasn't that high. That's the reason I wanted to make sure that the numbers you're getting from Mindy are definitely the ones without the groceries and utilities, because I specifically asked that after the meeting. I was looking at our percentage of sales tax, which are groceries, and I'd say, okay, how are we getting $1 million when this much of our sales tax is now gone?
Well,
so I just wanted to clarify.
Sounds like I
think
need
we're
to
still high, and I agree we're still second, but I don't think we're at $1 million.
Sounds like I need to reconnect with Mindy, because when she and I met, I was very clear to her to pull out groceries and utilities.
Right. And it might be. It's just that's not the impression I got from her when I talked to her after the meeting.
Okay. I will reconnect with her and close that loop.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, you guys, this has been a very good discussion, a very good debrief on what we kind of all are coalescing and issues. And this is exactly what we wanted to hear. We didn't want to let silence go by weeks later and get back. We really need to, this RTA is going to connect our community. Let's start connecting now. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that everyone's on the same page. We're all in dialogue. A representative from each community is part of this conversation, and we're having enough of them. And I think what we're going to do is be able to get, by the end of the month, some polling and really get this thing going to the next level, which is, the community outreach. Is there anything more that I think the next time we will see each other will be at those public hearings? I will be out of town in South Carolina, but I plan on Zooming in all of them. So the only one that was a challenge, I think, Randy, I don't know how often you guys Zoom into those meetings, but I want to make sure that I'm at least available, but I know Bill will be available and others as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hey, one thing I'll add for Bill sorry, my camera just stopped working, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Is with those second rounds, Bill, I know you asked at the top of the meeting, from my perspective, you do not need to present again. We can maybe touch on some updates if we have them, but really nothing as comprehensive as what you did the first round. So that's my opinion, though, but I'm open. Interested what other people have to say about that.
I agree. I mean, it was, at least from the Craig and what I saw in Steamboat, and I assume from Sonia's view, it was pretty detailed. And we didn't have questions. I mean, we did, but not really. So I would think it's just a follow up. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. And I'll touch base with everyone as I prep for meeting number 2 to make sure I'm accomplishing what your jurisdiction would like to have accomplished.
All right, everybody. Without any other questions, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And thank you all for your time and very good participation. We're going to get this over the finish line. I hope that we can, for our communities to be connected by a bus system. And that's what we can control. We can't control the rail. And that's what I've said to many people. We cannot control, if the state doesn't put in what their part is. Commuter rail is not even part of the conversation. So let's focus on what Yampa Valley can do, and that's to get buses on the roads that we already have. And so connectivity. So use that as the messaging when it comes to rail, that, we're going to try to do what we can control, and that's this RTA. All for? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Polly. Thanks, everybody.